This week, we're going to talk about being a pilot. Why don't we just jump right into it?
Well, I'd like to start our conversation with a little joke. Do you know what airplane pilots and helicopter pilots have in common?
What's that?
They both want to be helicopter pilots.
Dr. Patrick C. Ryan is a vascular surgeon in Nashville, Tennessee, and is affiliated with TriStar Centennial Medical Center.
He received his medical degree from Medical University of South Carolina College of Medicine and has been in practice for more than 20 years.
Let me tell you what an autorotation is. An autorotation is a simulated engine failure in a helicopter. Now, people might think if a helicopter's engine fails, it just drops like a stone. It doesn't. It can. And if you don't do something, you're going to die.
That sounds very cool, but sounds like there's a high level of margin for error there.
Well, here's the thing. According to the book, if the RPMs drop below 80%, the helicopter becomes a brick, and you're just...
Welcome to the InterestingMD podcast, the show about what doctors do when we aren't seeing patients and how this can help us find balance and prevent burnout. I'm your host, Rob Beck. Welcome to another episode of the InterestingMD podcast. I have another InterestingMD all-star here, Dr. Patrick Ryan. Patrick is back, as you know him, as an entrepreneur who starts his practice. He fights for his patients. And we alluded to some really cool things that he does. And he has been kind enough to come back on and talk about them. This week, we're going to talk about being a pilot. And you say, yeah, Rob, you already talked about being a pilot, not a helicopter pilot. Patrick is both, but he is here to talk about flying a helicopter. So we all grew up and everybody wanted to be a pilot because we watched Top Gun. But those of us who grew up watching Magnum always wanted to be TC as well. Here's Patrick. Patrick, welcome back.
Thank you. It's great to be back. It's great to see you as always, Rob. I wish I could see you in person.
I know. We've got to make it happen.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming back on. And as a total switch, of course, you're a big entrepreneur. You've started lots of companies, started your own practice, all those things. But you are also a pilot. And we're talking about how we could get you on and talk about being a helicopter pilot, because that's really, really cool and really, really difficult. Why don't we just jump right into it? Why don't you tell me about your history of flying? And I know that you started off being an airplane pilot, the traditional pilot. How did you get into aviation? How did you start all of this?
Well, I'd like to start our conversation with a little joke. Do you know what airplane pilots and helicopter pilots have in common?
What's that?
They both want to be helicopter pilots. It's
and
true.
There we go.
That's true. You ask any pilot, you ever flown a helicopter? No. You want to do that? Oh, yeah. All airplane pilots want to at least try flying a helicopter.
Okay. Well, So for all the pilots out here, here's your chance to learn how to do it.
And in the comments section, as if you're a pilot, you may leave your comments, but I know deep down you really want to fly a helicopter, right? It's true. I've wanted to fly from my earliest memory. I've always been obsessed with aviation and rockets, and I was just that kind of kid. I built Estes rockets as a kid. Remember Estes rockets? Are you too young for Estes rockets?
No. I never built one, but yeah.
And, I'm into Star Wars and all that stuff. My first opportunity to actually get any small aviation time was when I was a little kid. In the summers, my parents were divorced, and I spent the summers in South Carolina, in Loris, South Carolina, which is a town of about 2,500 people. At the time, it had one stoplight. I think it has 3 now. And on the weekends, parachutists from the Myrtle Beach Air Force Base would come to Loris, because it was a little 5,000, maybe 4,000 foot strip, fields all around. It was no traffic, no aviation traffic, perfect place to parachute. And so as a little kid, literally age 7 to, 12 or 14, in the summers, and my dad, who was not so much into the whole parenting thing, would just take us, and this was in the 70s and early 80s, take us and dump us at the airport all day. Literally, we'd get there at 9 in the morning, and he'd come get us at dark. We were gone. And it was me and my 2 brothers who were older than I. And we would watch these parachutists, and it was awesome. And just watching the airplane go around. And there was this one guy who also parachuted a little bit. Now, all these guys are in the Air Force, right? Or all in the Air Force, active Air Force. And they knew all us kids, and they were sweet. They were very sweet. And it was just a very cool, wholesome atmosphere. As a little kid, I was looking up at these big, tall, Air Force whatever. And, they were gods to me. Well, anyways, the guy who flew the plane they used for all the parachuting was an old Cessna 182, and your parents will know that's a 4-seat airplane. Looks just like a 172. It's got a little more power. It's got 235 horsepower. It can carry a lot of weight. And it's legal to strip all the seats out of it except the pilot's seat. And I think you can put 4 or maybe 5 people in there with parachutes on it. And had a door that they modified that just flipped up. And so they would fly in this 182. Well, one day when the weather was kind of a little bit low for parachuting, clouds are too low, and you spent a lot of time waiting on rain to pass or something like that. And we were just waiting around, and the pilot, and his nickname was Waldo, as in Waldo Pepper. Waldo Pepper was one of the legendary barnstorming pilots of like the 1920s, 1930s, when guys would fly in the Midwest with their biplanes and offer rides for 5 cents, and very dangerous occupation. But anyways, Waldo Pepper was like the most famous barnstorming pilot. So Waldo, a pilot who, I think back now, he's probably in his late 20s, but to me, he was, the most mature old man imaginable. He'd been watching me and my 2 brothers just, sitting around like doofuses, waiting for someone to go parachute. And he had just landed or something. The engine was still running and the doors flipped up. And he's like, come here. And when we ran to the door, he's like, get in. And so we get in, we shut the door. So it's Waldo in the flight seat and us just sitting on the floor of this airplane. Let's how we say this is not FAA regulation, how you do it with little kids.
Also sounds like kidnapping just a little bit.
And we go up there and he proceeds to do a bunch of, I think he'd call it a parabolic loop, where you go like this and then you dive down and you become weightless. And he made these little kids in a 182, which is a pretty big airplane for a little kid, weightless, turning flips, doing all that stuff you see in the vomit comments. And it was amazing. How many people get to say they did something like that? And I did it when I was like age 8 or something. It was amazing. Right before he landed, I puked into a towel, but they're worth it. Okay.
So he had to know that was coming, right?
That was my first great aviation story. And fast forward many years, I got through college. I was in med school. There was a guy in my med school class named Ed Nolan who was as obsessed about planes as I was. And keep in mind, I've been reading Flying Magazine. In med school, the internet was just about to start. This was 94. And so I had subscriptions to Flying Magazine, AOPA Pilot. If I was really bored, in college and sometimes in med school, you have times when you're just bored stiff. I'd go to the airport and just watch airplanes. So always just been such a love of aviation. And there was a guy in my class, Ed Nolan, and he was sort of a mover and a shaker, a wheeler dealer. And he found this deal where he found a church who owned 2 airplanes so that they could fly Bibles to Bahamas or somewhere. Really, it was just a ruse for the pastor of this church to get the church to buy him 2 airplanes. And he had a Piper Warrior and he had a twin, a nice little airplane, a twin. I think it was a Piper Aztec. Ed got to know this preacher dude who was, a total scam artist. Let's face it. He convinced this preacher dude to let me use this Piper Warrior for free, no charge, which is crazy. All I had to pay was the gas. And then Ed found me an instructor who was Dutch. And a lot of pilots in the United States come from the Netherlands. A lot of Dutch pilots in this country. The Dutch are pilots. And so we found this pilot named Johan something. And Johan needed hours so bad he would teach me for free. Basically, I got to learn how to fly in med school. When I had less than zero money, I was borrowing my way through med school and college, but I could afford, $20 of gas at a time because gas was pretty cheap at the time. And so I got free lessons. Johan was instructing me in a Piper Warrior, and I managed to actually stow low and do a few short solo cross countries by myself in med school. And then the fun, the plane got repossessed. Johan got a job, and then it stopped. So that was my first, I loved it. And ask any pilot, there's nothing like landing a plane. Just the sense of accomplishment, particularly when you're first starting, particularly in your first solo. You always do 3 landings on your first solo. You're not quite sure if you're going to die or not. You really aren't.
You're like, I'm pretty sure I'm not because I got in here, but I'm not exactly sure.
The mortality rate of first solo, it's probably single digits, but it ain't 0. You know what I mean?
It's a good thing Andrea is not listening to this podcast because there is definitely no way that she would let me do this. But I've tried to convince her repeatedly to let me do a podcast on skydiving. And that is like a total.
Have you got that?
Yeah, once, like when I was
I did it
22.
I did it with my
Yeah.
daughter, Ava, for her 18th birthday. We jumped out of a plane in Tullahoma. It was awesome.
I have been informed that if I attempt to do that, it will result in an immediate divorce.
I mean, check your life insurance. There's probably, you've probably had your life insurance long enough. It doesn't matter if you, they say about skydiving, don't you?
What?
It's not the fall that kills you. It's the landing.
It's the landing. Yeah. Anyway, I don't get to do that.
So go through med school, got married, residency, I'm going to learn how to fly in residency. I got married, residency, kids, and, you're so busy with little kids, and you had 3 little kids. I just had 2, but you had twins. And then about the time the girls were 7 or 8, they were a little bit more on autopilot. They were in school. I finally was getting some me time. Now, at the beginning of my career, I was probably 5 or 8 years into my career. I asked Susan, can I go fly? And she knew how I was. And she's like, okay. Then I started over because I hadn't flown in, 15 years. And went and learned how to fly. First with an instructor named Tim, who was really pretty funny because he would just dog cuss me when I messed up. I mean, it was like not the right motivation, but I'm motivated.
Like, am I back in residency again?
I'm actually, I did really well in the residency because you can treat me like crap and I'd kind of get into it and it doesn't bother me at all. I don't take it personally. Maybe he just learned how to motivate me. And so I got my private pilot license and I immediately went and got my instrument rating with a different instructor named Alan Safranek, who's now a Southwest pilot, great guy. And I got my instrument license and I was because once you get your instrument license, you can really travel. And I've had some amazing trips. And I ended up buying the airplane that I got my instrument license in and put some better avionics in it. And I flew that damn thing everywhere. I flew it to, I've flown it to the Bahamas. Oh, can I tell you a quick story about the Bahamas?
Yeah, please.
About helicopters, I'm getting there. So flying to the Bahamas, in my little Piper Era, I went and picked up 2 friends who shall remain nameless. In South Carolina, but old lifetime friends, and picked them up in South Carolina. Flew to South Carolina from Tennessee, stayed the night, and then we flew from Tennessee to, without fuel stop, all the way down to Fort Myers? Is it just north of Miami? It's whatever Fort
Lauderdale.
Fort Lauderdale. Thank you. Fort Lauderdale. And it's just north of Miami. We fly to Fort Lauderdale. People go in the Bahamas. They always leave from Fort Lauderdale because it's general aviation. And there's you have to do some immigration stuff before you leave. You have to rent a raft. You have to rent proper life jackets. So you can't fly beyond the glide speed of your airplane to land without a life raft, even though it's only about 80 miles to the Bahamas. And so we go there and a lot of research and I was nervous, never been out of the country. You have to buy a radio license and all this stuff. So we did it. We fly into the Bahamas at the same airport that I went to when I went with my kids to Atlantis a year or 2 before. I mean, it was great. Flying in the Bahamas in your own plane. They just come right to your plane. They take all your bags for you. Super polite. You go inside the customs. It's like, no problem. I can't do a Bahamian accent. I wish I would. Let us take your bags. Oh, we've got a car for you right here. So nice. And I was going to a meeting. I was going to the Southeastern Surgical Congress, which was meeting in Atlantis that year. That was sort of my reason for flying down there. And so we get to Atlantis and I got a room with 2 beds. So they took 1 bed and I took the other. And we were in the room. And keep in mind, I'm in a foreign country. The female of this couple was unpacking on the bed beside me. She goes, oh, I didn't know I had this marijuana in this bag. It's like, what?
You just drug trafficked.
I said, I don't want to know what the inside of a Bahamian jail looks like. So anyways, I got through that. That was a crazy trip, but fun. I had fun. And I flew up to Vermont, way north of Vermont. Probably the single coolest thing I ever did in my plane was flying into O'Hare Airport. Single pilot. Flying into O'Hare Airport. And they were so cool because as an IFR pilot, you have a right to land at any non-military airport. They can't say no. If you file for O'Hare, they're going to take you there. And I was flying into O'Hare and I was coming from due south and I'm flying and I'm over downtown and I can see O'Hare is down here and I'm looking and you look over the lake and there's 20 miles of jets just on fire. They're just bringing everybody in. And I'm flying along. I was like, there's a gap right there. And just as I got to beam the touchdown point, and I'm like 3,000 feet above the field. So long way above the field, usually 1,000 feet above the field when you're coming in for a landing. I was 3,000 feet above the field. And they said, November 15022, clear to land, expedite, please. Because I see all these jets are coming in. They're all new. And so your pilots will understand this. I threw out everything I had. So I threw the flaps out, I threw my gear down, and I just dove for the, and I was really very experienced at that point. I was super comfortable in this airplane, and I just dove for the runway. On the way down, I said, how far down the runway do you want me to land? Because it's 2 miles long. It's like 10,000 feet.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, land about a third of the way down. Then you can, because they know I can be stopped like that.
Yeah.
And so I got down and they told me to turn off. And when you're taxiing these huge airports, I didn't know this going in. I learned you don't talk to one ground controller. You talk to about 10. Every 200 feet, they're like, okay, monitor ground 0.4. Okay, monitor ground 0.5. And you don't acknowledge them like you normally do. They just want you to keep switching the radios. Because remember, every other plane that's in there has got 2 pilots. And one guy's doing the radio, the other guy's driving the airplane. I'm doing all of it. I only blew through one taxiway. They told me to hold short on Alpha or something. I was so overwhelmed. I blew right through it. And so I finally get over to, it was probably signature flight support, the general aviation, where all the, Gulfstreams are. And as I'm pulling in, the ground controller, he says to me, good job, Patrick. And then I park. They never call your name, right? But they have my name in the script. He said, good job, Patrick. And I parked my plane in the middle of these, $30 million jets. And I'll be damned if Signature Flight Support didn't send 2 guys out there with a golf cart and a red carpet. I'm not kidding, a red carpet. Put it right by my wing. I step off onto the red carpet. They take my badge. And that was just an amazing experience. I was there for one night. I went to a vascular surgery board review course. That's why it was there. It was right on the airport. So I was like, fuck it up. Screw it. I'm flying my plane in there here. And my pilot buddies were like, you're crazy, man. I would never do that. But I'm like, listen, I'm IFR rated. I can go there. They can't stop me. I'm going. And the weather was excellent. It wasn't like it was low IFR or anything. It was a beautiful day.
What kind of plane did you have?
That's a great airplane story. And I've relived those moments many times. So I quit flying because I couldn't get my family to go with me. My wife she's been in my plane. I've flown her to Florida. It was not a fun experience. She flew down to Florida with me once with the kids.
She was still trying to tell you where to go. Andrea would definitely be telling me, I'm flying too close to that jet in front of you.
When you're in an airplane, altitude is safety, right? Because if your engine quits, if you got more altitude you have, the more options you have. And so we're flying into Florida. It was a warm day. It might have been summer. I don't remember. But in the summer, in little planes, it's super bumpy until you get above the clouds, level of the clouds. Super bumpy. So I was above the clouds and it was getting kind of bumpy. And then ATC took me down further. It was really bumpy. And I was coming into Orlando. I was like, hey, can you detour me over by Kennedy Space Center? I just want to see it. And the guy was like, yeah, no problem. And so he starts to turn me, I think, east towards Kennedy Space Center. And Susan is going crazy with the bump. She's like, get down now, land now. I mean, she almost got violent. And I said, okay, never mind, guys, just vector me to final. And so I landed. Yeah, great landing. The flight was no problems. We get in, and the girls were in the back. They were little. They didn't care. And we get down, and she got out of the airplane. She said, I am never doing that again. So we did Disney World or Universal, whatever we did. But this is a very proud moment, and all your pilot buddies will get this. They dropped me at the airport. She bought Southwest tickets, direct flight to Nashville. They dropped me at the airport. I left, and I picked them up at Nashville Airport. I got there before them. And I landed in Smyrna. I had to drive from Smyrna all the way to Nashville. Okay, I'll shut up about that. So there was no more flying for my family. And, flying by yourself is a solitary thing. And, nobody's got time for flying. And I'm not the kind of, I don't want to be away from my family. A lot of guys I know will go to the hangar and just hang out at the hangar. And there's a lot of community at airports, a wonderful community. And I wasn't at a time in my life where I could really take advantage of that community. So I sold the airplanes and that was that. And then about a little over a year ago, I had lunch with a friend of mine, Brooke Barzik, who's the husband of Tisha Barzik, who you probably remember.
Yep.
Remember Tisha? She's awesome.
Yep.
And I had lunch with Brooke, and he had just played with flying helicopter. I took a few lessons, didn't really do much. And Brooke started about the same time I did. And this is a few years later. And I go to Brooke, and Brooke at this point has got his private license. He's got his commercial license. He's got his instrument rating, and instrument certified flight instructor for instruments rating and helicopter. I mean, he's got all the ratings, and he started an airplane company called Aviation. And I really like Brooke. He's a great guy. He's sort of between our ages. I think Brooke's late 40s. And I just brought him lunch one day just to hang out. He's like, yeah, man, you really should finish your helicopter stuff. He said, come work for me. I'm like, what did you just say? I said, he's like, yeah, just get your private and get your commercial. You'll do fine. You get your commercial and you come fly tours for me. I'm like, no, bro, don't play with me here because.
Right. Don't toy with my emotions.
Don't play with my emotions. He's like, no, I totally mean it. You're a smart guy. I know you're a very experienced pilot. I've got 700 hours in airplanes, and a lot of it IFR, a lot of it actual IFR. And he's like, no, you get your commercial, you'll be fine. And yeah, come work for me. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. Now, Brooke's not stupid. He knows that if I'm going to learn how to fly a helicopter, it's going to be with his company, and I'm going to spend a lot of money doing it. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's not dumb. And if Brooke were here, he'd say, that's right. And so over the past year or so, I've been working on first my private. I got my private done, and then I got my commercial done. And now I'm actually working on my certified flight instructor rating. Flew yesterday.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because I really love teaching people anything that I know a lot about. I love teaching it. Like, for instance, I have a new partner. Well, not new. She's been here almost going on 4 years in August. And I just loved showing her the ropes when she first came, and all the little tricks of the trade and how to do it operation faster and more efficient, and how to deal with systems. And all the tricks you learn when you're in practice, just all that stuff. Yeah. And so I've really, really enjoyed teaching. And so, I can teach somebody how to be a vascular surgeon. I could probably teach somebody how to fly an airplane, although I haven't flown an airplane in a while. And I think I will be good at teaching people how to fly helicopters.
Are you going to use the yelling and swearing at somebody and dog cussing somebody approach?
I'm more of a positive reinforcement type.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
No, I'm more of a positive reinforcement type. And I think it took me longer than the average person to learn enough to get my private pilot license. The private pilot license, you can fly safely. You're not going to kill anybody. You can take passengers. Commercial pilot license, it's much tighter standards. You now can be paid to take people, so you better be better.
So let's talk about that. Let's start there and just say, so when you want to go into being a pilot, so previously on the episode about becoming a pilot, there was like the initial, like 40 hours, 80 hours of becoming a private pilot's license, and that you also had to do ground school along with that. Is there like a helicopter ground school?
So to get your license as a helicopter pilot or an airplane pilot, you have to have a minimum of 40 hours.
Okay.
Nobody does it in 40 hours.
Okay.
Now I probably did in less than 40 hours, but I had a lot of experience going into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So is it the same kind of process though? Like, because I didn't realize that there was this ground school, like there was this whole other ground school that you had to do that was separate from flying. So is helicopters same thing?
There's a lot of book learning. There's two ways to do it. Part 141, which is an actual school. Like there's one in Clarksville, Tennessee, where you go in, you enroll as a full-time student, you're going to pilot school. And that's called Part 141. It tends to be a lot more efficient because you're just on it, books, fly. You do it a lot more quickly. You do it in fewer hours. In some ways, you may spend less money, but it is a full-time project. It's not something you can do and have a job, I don't think.
Yeah.
And so that's part 141. And that Part 141 are the FAA regulations. And there's Part 61, I think it is where you can have a flight school. It's, you go in, you have instructors, and you have sort of a self-made curriculum. For the way I work best is I work best just learning everything on my own. If you're a doctor, you can learn stuff from a book. I mean, it's something all doctors have the ability to do. Probably engineers and lawyers and lots of other types of people, but I'm good at studying. And so I like to learn the ground stuff. And when I have difficulty, I go to my instructor and say, hey, what about this thing? And let them explain things you don't quite understand. But honestly, it's not that hard. Anybody can learn this stuff, particularly if you're fascinated by it. And if you're going into flying, you better be fascinated by it.
So how long does this take to just get your private pilot's license compared to, or I guess it doesn't have to compare to, how long does it take?
So for a helicopter,
Yeah.
to learn how to fly a helicopter and get your private pilot license, if you really work at it hard and the money wasn't an issue, you didn't have to save up for lessons, you could probably do it in 6 months. If you have a full-time job.
Okay.
You know what I mean? If this is something you're doing in the afternoons and weekends and stuff like that, you could probably do it in 6 months. I think it's more typical 9 months or a year. I think it took me 9 months.
Okay.
But I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm running a business, I'm a
full-time
doctor.
surgeon. Yeah.
And my instructor that I have, basically the only one I have available to me doesn't work Sundays, which really sucks.
Perfect.
Yeah. It's like, it's one of the 2 days I can use, dude. So yeah, it took me a little bit longer. I worked at it pretty hard. The ground stuff, you can learn it, and you got to take a test. I didn't have to take a private pilot test for a helicopter because my private pilot from airplanes transfers, cross-mogenates. I did.
You didn't have to take the ground school?
I didn't have to take a test. You have to take it.
Okay.
So to get a white pilot license, you have to take a written test, pass it, and then you take Then you take another test, which is a practical test given by a designated pilot examiner or DPE, who's essentially a super experienced instructor that has been chosen by the FAA because of their experience and reputation. They go to DPE school and they come back, and they're a private business. You pay them, they examine you. You may or may not pass. And so do you want me to talk about the examination process?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. For helicopters, let's do it.
Yeah. So, you get through your private, your private written, and that's a test that you take at a testing center. It's about, I don't know what the private was, the commercial. There's a question bank of 800 or 900 questions. And the test you actually take, all but 2 of the questions you've probably seen before. But it's hard, but you can study and you can learn. And so for the check ride, it's about a 3 to 4 hour process. You arrive early and prepared with cash payment for your DPEs. Because for some reason, DPEs will like to get paid cash. Not sure why. Maybe they're not declaring it, but I don't know.
Who knows?
Let's not do an audit of all DPEs. So I had to show up with my cash for my DPE, who I knew, and nice guy, super experienced military pilot. I mean, he's flown every helicopter there is except for a Chinook. So I showed up. His name is John. You have 2 to 3 hours of oral examination, and he just goes through and just sees if you know what the heck you're talking about. If you've passed the written, you ought to pass the oral. But, I've listened to a lot of aviation podcasts, and they've interviewed these DPEs, and they're like, yeah, sometimes people come in and you just start talking to them and you realize, yeah, you probably shouldn't be here today. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you need to be prepared, and hopefully if you have a good instructor, you will not show up unprepared. And so you have an oral exam, then you walk out to the aircraft. You do your usual, pre-flight checks, and they have a set number of things that you have to do during the check ride. It's proscribed by the FAA. You have to go through this list of exercises, and all of them involve emergencies. They want to see if you know how to do emergencies. And for helicopters, the one part of the 2 parts of the check ride that are the emergencies that you can just fail. And one of those is what's called an autorotation. And so let me tell you what an autorotation is. An autorotation is a simulated engine failure in a helicopter. Now, people might think if a helicopter's engine fails, it just drops like a stone. It doesn't. It can if you don't do a few things, but it doesn't initially. So what happens is, instead of the main rotor pushing the air down and creating lift, the helicopter drops because there's no power being supplied to the rotor anymore, and the air starts going up through the rotor. So now the air is rushing up through the rotor, and that's what's turning the rotor blades. Well, you can control the RPMs of the rotor blade with your collective, with your left hand. So doing a auto rotation, like have you ever been in a helicopter?
Yeah.
Okay. When I get my CFI, and if you're ever down here, I'll take you flying. In auto rotation, you're flying along in a helicopter, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa. And it's scary. First couple auto rotations scared me. But the helicopter's dropping, and if you don't do something, you're going to die. And so you have to manipulate the controls, and you come in And it's really amazing to see the helicopter just come not down straight. You're going 70 knots in an R-22 and R-65. And you come in, and then right when you get above the ground, you kind of do a wheelie, and then you go like that and you land it. It's very dramatic. That's called an autorotation.
Okay, that sounds very cool, but sounds like there's a high level of margin for error there. So
yeah,
I don't know that.
Well, here's the thing. With rotor RPMs are measured into, I forget that they go at 303 revolutions per minute, or maybe 305. I should know that number. I don't. In the R-22, which is a little tiny two-seat helicopter. But you look at the RPMs in percent, right? And you want it at 100. During auto rotation, kind of you get it. It initially drops, and then it starts going up. And you want to keep it from getting too high, but you want to keep it from getting too low, because according to the book, and I'll never check this, no one will ever check this, but according to the book, if the RPMs drop below 80%, the helicopter becomes a brick, and you're gone.
Wow.
So you have to you're watching those RPMs really carefully. But engine failures in helicopters are very, very, very survivable. I mean, if done right, they're more survivable than in airplanes if you do them right.
Really?
Yeah, because you can put it anywhere. You can put a helicopter anywhere.
I guess
Helicopters are so. We haven't talked about how much fun helicopters are. You can go anywhere you want. I mean, that's not in like a it's not like, Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory or something. You can't fly around DC.
I mean, technically you could, but it would be dangerous because you'd get shot down.
They would kill you. Yeah, they would. Yeah, you would have like a Sidewinder missile up your butt. Like, if you fly, once when I was doing a cross country with Brooke, actually, I was doing my instrument cross country, and we were flying west of here. Do you remember our town or area called Hohenwald? You probably had a few things.
Oh, yeah.
Hohenwald. Oh, yeah. It's in the middle of nowhere. But you know what's there? There's an elephant sanctuary there.
Oh,
Did you know this?
Yeah.
There's an elephant sanctuary that you can't visit. There's no visitors. It's just like people who love elephants pay a lot of money. Michael Jackson's elephant or elephants went there. In a helicopter, you can look at the elephants. Now, it would be rude to fly near the elephants. We didn't do that. But, you can get within 500 feet of them, no problem. Like, check that out. That's cool.
Yeah, you can see elephants. That's really cool.
And, I was flying along once on a lesson, and there was a cool boat in the river. I said to Levi, I was like, dude, let's check out that boat. And we're just like, okay, go down, check out the boat. It's so amazing. It's so much fun. Flying a helicopter is more fun than flying an airplane.
So what's the difference between it? Because, we're all pretty familiar with what it looks like to fly an airplane, and, you've got your yoke and you've got your speed and your flaps and there's buttons and everything everywhere. What's the difference between being a helicopter pilot and being an airplane pilot?
Okay. If you're in basically any airplane, from a 747 to a Piper Cub, and you're flying alone, and you let go of everything, literally cross your arms, the plane will just keep flying, nice and straight. All right. They are dynamically, there's an engineering term like dynamically stable. So once you put them in a particular flight configuration, they will stay in that flight configuration. All right. You put them in a turn, they just kind of stay in the turn. Some planes, if I put it in a climb and then let go, it would go back down, and then it would kind of oscillate, and eventually it would find straight level, all by itself doing nothing. If you're in a helicopter and you let go of everything, you die.
Okay.
You just die. You die. Because there are certain maneuvers that if you do, particularly with a Robinson helicopter, a two-bladed helicopter, if you go negative Gs, like if I take the cyclic, which is the stick, I hold my right hand, and I push forward, that's called a negative G maneuver. And what will happen is you get a mast bump. It's not mast bumping, it's mast bump, because there's only one. Because when you mast bump, the rotor shears off. So you can't push the stick forward in a two-bladed helicopter ever, because you'll just shear off the rotor. That helicopter that crashed in New York City, I've seen one guy say that he thinks that was a mast bump. YouTube helicopter pilot, British guy. He thinks that it was a mast bump. He thinks he pushed forward and sheared off, because remember, the rotor came off.
That's what I heard.
It just fell. Rotor came off, the tail came off. But what I saw and what others have seen is that the transmission went with it. So the transmission and the rotor came up, and the rotor just chopped off the tail, and then the cabin just fell, and those poor people just they died. I mean, it was an awful way to go. I don't think that was a mast bump, but that's kind of what would happen if you did a mast bump. But I don't think that was a mast bump.
So we don't want to do that. Sadly, some people found out about that and they eventually figured out what they were doing.
Test pilots for a helicopter, man, no way. Never. For instance, if you let go, I'm most familiar with the Robinson R-22. I've got more than 100 hours in it now. If you're hovering and you let go, then you're going to go to the right and forward, and you're going to flip over because it just the way the helicopter is set up and the way the forces act. You just have to be. Helicopter flying is much, 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 much harder. It really is. Patting your head and scratching your belly and wiggling your tail.
Now, is that because of the torque? Like you're always fighting against the torque of the rotors. Is that right?
You are. That's exactly right. So the rotors are turning counterclockwise. In American helicopters, they turn counterclockwise. Europeans, they turn clockwise. In American helicopters, they're turning counterclockwise. So the body's always, the rest of the aircraft's trying to turn clockwise, right? Because of the torque, action and reaction, Newton's whatever, third law or something.
One of those.
One of Newton's laws. And so that's what your pedals are doing. Those are called anti-torque pedals. And they're controlling the pitch of the blade in the tail. And the pitch can go negative to positive. It's mostly positive. And the pitch of that tail holds the aircraft straight and prevents you from spinning. If I let go of the pedals, I'll spin like a top and crash. Well, that's not quite true. If you're in level flight at 70 knots or above and the tail rotor fails, and you train for this, it's called loss of tail rotor effectiveness or tail rotor failure. If the tail rotor fails and you're going over 70 knots, you're going to be getting enough wind over the back over the tail to keep you straight. But if you slow down, it's going to turn, and then you go.
All of a sudden it becomes an episode of Speed. It's like you can't go below 70.
Yeah.
If you do.
So when you do that, if you lose your tail rotor, if it like the gearbox breaks or something, there's a procedure for saving that. And that is you do a auto rotation all the way down, keeping it 70 knots or above, auto rotation. And then at the very end, you land immediately. It's called a full down auto. So even if you lose the tail rotor, you probably won't die.
Wow.
If you do it right. And things you got to train and you got to do it right.
You're probably getting into a little bit more. So now everybody's like, there is no way I'm going to be a helicopter pilot. So thanks, Patrick. So, all right. So tell people what you can do. Like, this is fun. So how much does this cost?
Okay. So the helicopter I rent, the R-22, is $300 an hour plus the instructor, who I think is $65 an hour. I don't remember what they charge for the instructor. And I'll be honest, I've spent north of $20,000 doing this. It's just
but this is with all of your different trainings, right? So what about just getting your private? So you just want to get
private, and you might do it for, let me do math. Call it $400 an hour, 40 hours. What's 400 times 40? Is that 16,000? That's 16,000. $16,000 would probably get you a pilot license if you did it exactly 40 hours. But it's expensive. It's super. There's nothing about flying that's cheap, and helicopters are way more expensive than airplanes because they cost more, they're more to maintain, etc.
I mean, do most people buy their own? So you've had your own plane. Jeff Carey, who was on here before, has his own plane that people
love his podcast, by the way. Love to meet that guy.
Yes, Jeff is really awesome, and you guys would have a lot of fun, and I would be totally left out of the conversation. So,
well, you know how to tell if someone, if someone's a pilot?
How? They'll tell you.
Yeah, they'll tell you.
So, but are there things like helicopter clubs? Like, I know that there are flying clubs where they'll have things like that.
I mean, there may be somewhere, but it's helicopter pilots.
You're like, yeah, they're called the military.
Yeah, they're called the military. No, really. Or the police. I have a friend who recently retired from the Nashville Police Department, and he ran all their helicopters, and they flew nice helicopters, and he never paid for a single helicopter lesson. If you want to learn how to fly a helicopter, join the military. If that's really your passion, let them pay for it, and you'll fly a lot nicer helicopters than I'm flying. And, I've said it's all dangerous and all, but it's not. You train for it.
I mean, it's just like cutting somebody open. If you talk about doing an open aortic repair, that's really, really dangerous until you're trained. Like it would be, for you, it's fine. For me, that would be catastrophic.
Well, the training and because here's the thing that a lot of the general people that are afraid of flying don't understand this. Airplanes and helicopters wreck almost exclusively because somebody did something stupid. I mean, run out of gas in an airplane, done. Fly into instrument. This is what happened to Kobe Bryant. Fly into instrument conditions when you're not A, instrument rated, B, on an instrument flight plan, or C, comfortable flying in instruments. I mean, Kobe Bryant, that was a totally unnecessary death by a pilot that made an unforgivable error that should never, ever, ever happen. But the thing is people keep doing the same thing over and over again. I myself, and maybe I lack humility, but I really don't think I'm going to make any of the class of dumb mistakes that people make. I'm never going to run out of gas. I'm never going to fly into instrument conditions. And particularly in a helicopter, if I suddenly am flying along and like, oh my God, I can't see the ground. Well, one, I'm going to turn around, and two, I'll have enough situational awareness to know I can just go down, and just go down and land anywhere. But if you're in an airplane, you're kind of stuck. But people, they they call it get their-itis. They do dumb things. And unfortunately, pilots keep making the same mistakes year after year after year after year. The FAA, the AOPA, Airline Robinson, Cirrus, everybody's working hard to prevent this from happening, and it keeps happening. Yeah. And it's sad, it's unfortunate, and it makes it much less desirable for people to get in general aviation aircraft. And that's unfortunate because there's so much good to be done. So much fun.
So what are you doing with it now? So now you have your private pilot's license, you have your commercial license.
I have my commercial.
Right? You have your instrument license, is that right?
Well, I do in airplanes, one helicopters. I'm not interested in getting in helicopters because I'll never, ever, ever use it in a helicopter. I fly instruments in airplanes, no problem. Helicopter, no way.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And so now, aside from doing your instructor, what are you doing with your helicopter pilot?
Well, I'm supposed to start flying tours here soon for Brooke. But the thing about it is it's sort of a practicality issue for Aerolux. They're a really great company. They've got a lot of nice young men who all want hours. All pilots want hours. And all pilots who are working in aviation want a lot of hours. Because these kids don't want to be flying tours the rest of their life. They want to be working for air, medevac, working for, Coast Guard maybe, working for the police, doing some really cool, exotic, sexy job, which I'll never do. I'm happy to fly. I'm very happy to just fly tours, frankly. I'm ready to fly tours. They just got to get me on the schedule. But, these kids want those hours and frankly need those hours more than I do. Hopefully they'll let me start doing it soon. I mean, I'm ready to. It's not hard. It's very easy flying a tour. I've ridden shotgun on a bunch of tours and it's not a big deal. And it's fun flying over Nashville and, showing them the Parthenon. I mean, listen, if you come back, the aerial tour of Nashville is fantastic. I mean, you get to see the Parthenon, you get to see Vanderbilt. You don't appreciate how big and complex and sexy Vanderbilt Medical Center is. It's really something else. Belmont University is growing. They've got some new buildings that are beautiful. The new Titan Stadium, that's going to have a roof. They're building it right beside the old stadium. Who's that really huge heavy metal band touring? Metallica. Metallica just had a show at Titan Stadium, Nissan Stadium. And we were flying over and you could see them getting ready for the Metallica show. And that was kind of cool. And then flying down Broadway at night when it's packed with tourists and everybody, it's really a cool experience.
That's really
fun. You
fun.
can only do that in a helicopter. It's so cool.
So what kind of restrictions are there? So, I assume that I used to see the helicopters that they would take off out of the airport. Like, where do you start off at the airport? Like, where do you start off?
We start off at Johnson Airport, which is slightly north and west of the city.
Okay. So not near Nashville International, but that's kind of the general aviation airport, right?
As soon as you take off, you see, that's the thing. You see how close it really is. As soon as we take off, about a mile from the airport, we call Nashville Tower because Nashville Tower controls all the area within 4 or 5 miles of their airport, which includes downtown Nashville. And so you take off, you fly about a mile, you contact Nashville Tower, and you just tell them what they're doing. They know who you are, and they'll let you go. Now you can't go, they won't let you near the airport unless it's safe.
Right.
One thing I did on one of my cross countries that I found out after the fact was I was not approved to do by my instructor, but I did it anyways. I did a cross country with the Robinson R-22. Just think washing machine that's a helicopter. China, right?
We're going to have some pictures of it. I think that you've sent me some photos, so we'll have some online for you.
I meant to do a video of an auto rotation yesterday, but I forgot to. So I was flying back from Smyrna, and I was like, I'll just go do a touch and go at Nashville International. So I called them up, and I'm comfortable on the radio. New pilots are usually not comfortable on the radio. I am, because I've flown a lot. Once you've been to O'Hare, you can do anything. So I called them, and I was like, November, whatever, 1234, helicopter November, helicopter 1234, just off Smyrna, would like to come do a touch and go at your airport. And like, there's this pregnant pause. And they were like, what? I was like, yes, sir, I'm a student pilot. I'd like to land at Nashville International and take off again and then proceed on to John Tune Airport. And they're like, you could just hear him like rolling his eyes on, okay, all right. Well, he gave me a vector and I followed it in, and then he landed, and then he had me land on the touchdown point on like runway, whatever, 22, I don't know what it was. And I sat there just idling, watching the jets kind of take off around me. And they said, okay, you can get her now. It was just took off and left. But you gotta have permission to do that. And that's something that even the kids, I call these guys kids because they're all in their 20s and 30s. The thing is, a lot of them don't understand, because helicopter pilots don't fly cross country. Helicopters, local flying. Nobody's taking a helicopter and flying 300 miles unless you got to get the helicopter 300 miles, unless you got to get the helicopter there for some reason. So I've flown a lot of long distance. I've talked to a lot of different ATCs. And every now and then when the timing's right, you got to judge the mood. It can't be busy. Every now and then, you can even chat with ATC a little bit. People are intimidated by them, but and when you meet these guys and you talk to them, they're just there to help. They just want to help. Not a lot of them. Many of them are pilots. They get it. You're allowed to ask them anything. And I do ask for stuff, like flying into O'Hare. I knew I had the right to ask for it, and they did it. And it's a lot of fun talking to them. Like, I remember one time I was coming into a big airport. Yeah, I think it was Charlotte. There was like a jet miles behind me, right? Do you know what wake turbulence is? When a big jet comes in, it creates wake turbulence off the wingtip. Wingtip, you get vortices. And if a little airplane flies into it, it can literally just flip you and kill you. And so whenever a big jet comes in, you're following a bigger plane, they'll say, caution wake turbulence. I was coming into Charlotte, I think, and there was a plane miles behind me. They said, November 15022, cleared to land, runway, whatever. And I got the guy behind me, whatever he was, Delta 1234. And I got on the thing, and I said, Delta 1234, caution my wake turbulence. And the guys got on, they literally laughed on the radio. They thought that was great. And helicopters you said, why are helicopters fun? The guy, I didn't get to participate. They had egg drops on Easter with helicopters. We've had proposals in helicopters. Oh, I've been part of one of these, a reveal in a helicopter. So you hover over somebody's house and you pull the pink smoke grenade. And so they get to see that it's going to be a girl. There's a lot of fun, stupid things you can do with a helicopter.
My neck of the woods, people, we actually do use this for transportation. So there is a huge helicopter network here. I think I was texting you about this a few years ago, sending you videos of Andrea going to work during COVID.
I remember that
going
video.
To work so she just gets in some Sikorsky helicopter, I don't know which one, that there's a jet service, a helicopter service that goes from Victoria to Vancouver. And
how long is that flight?
30 minutes. 30-ish minutes.
Oh, it's that far. I didn't realize it was that far. Yeah.
But it's awesome.
What an amazing job. If I could do that, if I didn't need to earn money, literally, I would just want to move there and just do that job. I'd just be happy going back and forth every day, just getting to fly.
It is really, really great. She likes doing that more than the seaplane. The seaplane, she was not as big a fan of because there is a lot of turbulence with that. She's not as big, but there's a seaplane airport. There's helicopters that fly all over the place. There's tons of people in the logging industry that use helicopters here as well. And so
logging and helicopters is a big deal.
Search and rescue is a big thing here with all the mountains and with air ambulances like you were talking about. That's a very BC Ambulance ferries people all over the place in emergencies.
You talked about the cost. I want to can we
Yeah,
circle back to
please.
that? I'm a 57-year-old surgeon. I'm extremely fortunate to be able to do this. And I realize that, and I don't take it for granted at all. But
this is a podcast for doctors. So,
I know, but non-doctors are going to see it too, But for a young kid, okay, let's say you spend 40, even 50 grand getting all those ratings. You can then have a really rewarding, exciting, good paying career, because those jobs in logging, search and rescue, the airline transport stuff, they pay really, really well. I mean, it's a good career. How many people get in 50 grand of student loan debt? I mean, a lot. I had way more.
Which semester?
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? So even though it's expensive for a career, it's not an unreasonable investment. And if they said, hey, Dad, this is what I want to do, I would treat it as a college education. Say, okay, brother or sister, let's go. Of course, I would geek out because I would think that'd be awesome. But
you'd be like, you're going to go with me? And then my kids would get all excited. And then I would tell them I would want to do it with him, and they'd back out. Yeah. I'd be like, oh, never mind.
I doubt that. Your kids love you. You're a cool dad.
Oh, well, I'm trying to be. Although
you're a cool dad.
My kids, now that they know that they're not going to get to go skydiving with me on their 18th birthday, they're going to be very upset about that.
This is what you do. Tell me how this works out for you. I know this is an interesting doctor's podcast. Try this tactic. You say, Andrea, I'm the man of this house.
You can't even get through that phrase. You can't even get through that phrase without, like, no way.
I wouldn't even. I'm afraid of Andrea, and she's like that big.
So the way that it usually works, and my tactic with the skydiving, and it is decidedly blown up in my face, is to just gently put it out there that I really want to do it and it's probably going to happen, and let her get used to the idea of it a little bit. And then usually she'll just kind of get to the point of I'm bored and the eye roll happens. And then I'm like, so I can do it. That is not the case this time. I tried this a few weeks ago, and the rebellion was violently put down. I was like, okay.
It's not going to be like the kegerator.
No. Single greatest story ever. But no, that is not one of those things. Now, if Andrea ever does say, oh yeah, you could totally, I'd let you go skydiving if you did this, I would take that. But she learned her lesson with the kegerator, and that will never happen again.
I think your listeners would love to hear the kegerator story. It's probably the best. I think if you get to know Rob and Andrea, it's probably the best Rob and Andrea story that I know about. There's probably more, but this is the best one I know about.
Yeah. So for those of you who have made it this far, this is the most amazing story ever. That we had this beer that we really liked when we lived in New Orleans. It was a Beta Strawberry Harvest. They only had it in this. It was a regional brewery, and they only had this beer in the spring. And we finally got it when we moved to Nashville. We found a few bottles of it at Whole Foods. So we bought it, we took it home, and Andrea takes a drink of it on a really hot afternoon. And she was like, man, if you could find this in a keg, I would let you buy a kegerator. And the smartest thing I've ever done in my married life was just shut up and say nothing. I just drank my beer and held my childlike excitement. The next day, I found out from the local store that I could get a keg of a Beta Strawberry, that I would have to order it and that they could get it in, but I could find it. And then that very afternoon, I ordered a kegerator off of Amazon, and it was delivered the next day. And so she knew exactly what she said, but she will never make that mistake ever again.
Yeah. Unfortunately, she's not dumb.
No. I keep trying, but she's not. Anyway, for the people out there, go do something fun. I mean, do they have discovery flights for helicopters?
Well, they do. They're a little more. I don't know the cost. They're more. Airplane's about $80 or $100. It's probably a little more for a helicopter. It's just the most amazing thing. I'll make a plug for Aviation in Nashville, Tennessee. They're great people. They'll take care of you. I'm really looking forward to becoming a CFI because I want to share. I have such extreme joy when it comes to aviation. I'm looking forward to sharing it.
Well, this is amazing. And Patrick, thank you so much. I
Great
think
to
that
see
this
you.
is all something that is really, really fun. See, these are the things that I want people to learn how to do. Like, go do fun things. Go think about it. Go try something. Have fun.
Yes,
So
I like that.
anyway, Patrick, thanks again for coming on. And thanks to sharing all of this experience with me and with all the listeners too. So until we get to go skydiving,
I'll do it
talk
with
to you later.
Well, I'm just gonna come up there and just say, yeah, Rob told me we were gonna go skydiving. I'm here.
Yeah, let's
Would
see
that
how that
work?
works out for you. No,
Just be
no,
like,
it would
yeah,
not.
F you, Patrick.
She would be sooner to let you fly me around in a helicopter than she would to go. I don't know why, but anyway, Patrick, thank you so much. I'll see you soon, buddy. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Interesting MD podcast. Please check out my content on YouTube at InterestingMD and follow me on TikTok, Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads, and Facebook at the Interesting MD and on X at InterestingMD. If you have comments or questions and want to get in touch with me or any of my guests, please DM me on socials or email me at rob@interestingmd.com. If you have any ideas for a show and you want to share your hobbies with me or don't know where to get started on your own project, you can email ideas@interestingmd.com. Please like and subscribe to the podcast and YouTube channel to get the latest content. Much appreciation to Falter Media for editing, producing, and posting all Interesting MD content. Check them out because if they can do this for me, imagine what they can do for you. See you next week.